Chartered scientist versus chartered biologist. Hello, as somebody providing instructional webinar materials on the Vocational Award of Chartered Biologist, but who is also in possession of Chartered Scientist, another vocational award denoted by the postnominal CSI, I thought I'd take this opportunity to provide bonus material describing, comparing and contrasting these two respective chartered professional registers. As outlined in this series of vignettes, a typical chartered biologist candidate is a full member of the Royal Society of Biology, MRSB, as an initial prerequisite, which engenders 3 years in a biosciences setting demonstrably at level 7, with either a formal level 7 master's degree in addition, or alternatively further equivalency years on top of the stipulated 3+ years to qualify for that initial MRSB status. Subsequently, having achieved MRSB status, a further 3+ years at level 7 in a biosciences setting is required, ideally with 1 to 2 years practice of management in order to confidently and competently answer specific managerial competency benchmarks to achieve chartered biologist registration. The same can also be said of chartered scientist. In other words, a chartered scientist is somebody who can demonstrate professional practice in a biosciences setting, in the case of RSB, for a total of 5 years at level 7, or alternatively, additional years of practice by virtue of equivalency. Moreover, chartered scientist is a vocational award achieved by submission of competencies via the RSB, in common with chartered biologist. And these two sets of competencies evaluate similar metrics and working practices such as technical theory and practice, aspects of professional practice such as application and updating of regulations in the extant workplace setting, ethical practices like EDI and data protection, and communication with specialist and non-specialist audiences alike, the latter personified by lay public, administrative bodies, finance, HR, and estates and services in the workplace setting. However, although competencies in part are congruous, indeed it is possible to use competency application materials from one type of award and transpose them into the application for the other, something in fact that I did. There are, however, differences in respective competency remits. For example, competencies associated with the award of chartered biologist, as detailed in webinar vignette 3 in particular, mandate information about practices outside of the workplace which further career progression and impact on the wider field, alluding perhaps to work, paid or voluntary, outside of the workplace, whereas competencies for chartered scientists do not specifically and explicitly ask for this type of evidence. Another difference between chartered scientist and chartered biologist is what one might call the provenance of each award. Whereas chartered biologist is designed, standardized, moderated, regulated and awarded exclusively by the Royal Society of Biology and is specifically meant to recognise biologists working in a plethora of biosciences environments and, moreover, in an international context. Chartered scientist, however, is designed, regulated and standardised by the Science Council and applies to all practicing scientists in the European Economic Area, but not internationally, in diverse STEM disciplines, including but not limited to engineering, physical sciences, chemical sciences and maths, as well as practicing bioscientists. In the context of RSB, the CSI award is made by the RSB, but with specific and explicit approval of and licensing from the Science Council. Nevertheless, the calibre, practicing attributes and standards are congruous for both awards, and the ensuing benefits are likewise convergent. So, for example, I gained both awards in 2017 based on these convergent experiences, achievements, responsibilities and qualifications. And my rationale in the first instance for obtaining both awards was likewise similar. Specifically, I became a chartered biologist as well as a chartered scientist in the first instance to validate my skills. However, there is a consensus that both awards are a useful exercise in compiling and reaffirming CPD as well, and the act of gaining the award, culminating in public postnominals, is also demonstrably a good confidence-building exercise. Another benefit of both awards is enhanced opportunities for networking and engaging in outside biosciences activities by virtue of full membership of, say, the RSB. Not only does this constitute useful CPD materials, but in my case has resulted in hitherto unexpected opportunities outside of my formal workplace setting to engage with bodies such as the Science Council, IST, NTDC and RSB themselves in order to deliver various types of workshops and compile instructional toolkits pertaining to both chartered scientist and chartered biologist, indeed and including delivery of this cachet of webinars pertaining to chartered biologist for the Royal Society of Biology. Finally, it is generally recognised that both awards can assist in interview shortlistings. In particular, the act of gaining chartered status implies somebody who is dynamic, engaged with standards, both ethical and technical, and demonstrably committed to CPD. Let me finish by saying that the cost for each application and retention, therefore, of CSci and CBiol via the RSB also differ. I refer you in this case to the relevant web pages for the current costs of each. The decision to apply for one or both of these professional registered is really down to the applicant. If, for example, you identify specifically as a bioscientist rather than a more generalised STEM-orientated pan-scientist, you might find that chartered biologist is a better fit for you. Thank you.